Michael Hammer is a genetics professor and researcher at Arizona State University in Tempe. AZPM 2017, Michael Hammer, The Gene Detective Story. Quote, he's a geneticist and has spent decades piecing together the history of human evolution. End quote. Quote, I think I was just motivated by genuine curiosity as to how did this all come to be, in terms of being human beings. How are we different from other species? End quote. Michael Hammer. In 2005, Hammer put out a paper with fellow geneticist Jeffrey D. Wall, Genetic Evidence for Archaic Admixture in Africa. From the paper, recent work suggests that an as of yet unidentified archaic African population contributed to at least 5% of the modern West African gene pools, respectively. Hammer, from his 2011 paper, our results allow us to infer that contemporary African populations contain a small proportion of genetic material, around 2%, that intergressed around 35,000 years ago. Continuing, that archaic population split from the ancestors of anatomically modern humans around 700,000 years ago. Hammer even mapped out human subspecies as shown on this graph he frequently used in presentations. In 2010, he and his team of lab researchers at ASU were brought in to investigate a strange anomaly from a DNA testing company. The team very shortly after made an amazing discovery. And then suddenly, in 2015, it all came to an end. The project was shut down. Did Hammer and his team get a little too close to solving an ancient enigma of human origins? Definition: a haplotype is simply a group of individuals who share the same genetic mutation in their gene code, a switch of a single nucleotide polymorphism. SNPs are the famous GTCNA, guanine, thymine, cytosine, and adenine. As we remember from basic biology class, a mutation caused by either natural selection or genetic drift can create a different sequence. Mutations lead to variation, isolation, and eventually full speciation. A00 haplotype. SLU EDU News 2020. A00 is best documented among the Embo and Bangwa ethnic groups. Continuing, A00 is a deeply divergent haplogroup, having split from all other known human lineages about 300 to 200,000 years ago. Quote, our analysis indicates deep human lineages which diverged from each other between about 250,000 and 200,000 years ago, including a deeply splitting ghost modern human lineage, end quote, said David Reich of Harvard Medical School. The Albert Perry Mystery. In 2012, an African-American genealogist, Jacqueline Johnson, submitted a dozen samples of Y chromosome DNA for testing. One sample is from her cousin, who was the grandson of a famous South Carolina slave named Albert Perry. That sample came back undetermined. They assigned the sequence to a new haplotype, A00. A00 is a subset of the rare A0 haplotype. Hammer's team had traced the DNA sequence back to a small village in western Cameroon. They then set up an on-site team in the village. The team took swab samples from 180 male villagers. 11 of the men of Embo tested positive as A00. And some of the men showed striking archaic facial morphology, including a sloping forehead, prognathism, and thick eyebrow ridges. Living archaic humans in West Africa? Dr. Hammer presented his findings to Carta at UCSD in 2013. Quote, "We discovered a very ancient and rare Y chromosome. Well, this particular lineage was discovered in an African American man from South Carolina who submitted his DNA, was very unusual, did not fit on the tree," end quote. Continuing, quote, "Interestingly, when we did extensive Y chromosome searches in the database, we were fortunate. In Africa, there were 11 that seemed to be related to this chromosome." Continuing, quote, "It turns out all 11 come from this tiny region of Western Cameroon from a farming group called the Embo," end quote. Other papers released in subsequent years would back much of Hammer's findings. A paper was published in 2020 on the Y chromosome in African men that confirmed Hammer's results. The paper had over 30 co-authors, many top names in the field of genetics. Y chromosome lineages in men of West African descent. Abstract. We typed Y chromosome specific markers in 1,319 men consisting of 508 West and Central Africans. Analysis provides support for significant Grain Coast ancestry among African American men in South Carolina. Michael Hammer, top of the field in genetics, then tragedy strikes. In the mid-2000s, the strange hobbits, Homo floresiensis, were announced. In 2010, Svante Pääbo had announced Neanderthal DNA admixture confirmed in the European genome. Hammer's paper was released in 2013. DNA analysis finds that early Homo sapiens mated with other human species. As a rival geneticist described it, quote, "The media went wild," end quote, over Hammer's findings. Dr. Hammer and his team had made the discovery of a lifetime, hard evidence of remnants of an archaic human population living in Africa. Hammer seemed destined for a Nobel Prize. In 2015, Dr. Hammer and his wife suffered a horrible personal tragedy. Their teenage daughter had an epileptic seizure and passed away. Dr. Hammer pulled back from the study of human origins. He dedicated his career to finding a cure for rare diseases in children. But at the same time, others were working behind the scenes to discredit his genetics work on Africa. By the mid-2010s, the political climate had shifted dramatically. Evidence-based science had given way to the social justice agenda. Africans and African Americans admixed with a more primitive species did not fit the narrative of the woke left. The left anthropology community pushed back especially hard on anyone who suggested Africans had admixture from a primitive hominid species. In 2014, a paper was put out that aimed to debunk the Albert Perry A00 hypothesis. It is this paper that comes up on top in search engines for anyone looking for information on A00 haplogroup. Hammer's research, as well as other information on archaic hominin DNA admixture in Africans, is much further down in the searches. But it turns out the rival geneticist, whose paper garners all the attention, has quite a shady past. More to come.